Welcome to Extraterrestrial Reality. Last week I was talking about cattle mutilations that were ongoing in Madison County, Texas. So there was, at that time, there were at least 6 cattle that had been discovered that were mysteriously mutilated by culprits unknown. Of course, law enforcement is investigating it, was investigating it, and we have no answers yet. And of course, I don't think we are going to get any answers. But now the FBI has moved in, and apparently the FBI has told the ranchers in that community that has been affected by cattle mutilations to not talk to anybody anymore about this publicly, to not talk to the press, don't talk to your buddies, don't talk to anybody. Now, this was reported by Linda Moulton Howe. Of course, Linda Moulton Howe, as we all know, is somebody who has investigated cattle mutilations since the 1970s. And she has her own YouTube channel, and on her recent podcast on YouTube, she was talking about this. She was actually, she had a guest on her show, Mindy Tautfest, MUFON field investigator from Oklahoma, who, by the way, at that moment was actually investigating a cattle mutilation that had occurred in her state of Oklahoma. And Tautfest told Linda Moulton Howe that the FBI had taken over the investigation in Texas from local law enforcement authorities and told the ranchers not to discuss the mutilations anymore in the public. And also, MUFON, in the local MUFON chapter in Texas, is investigating this. And Tautfest stated that she doesn't know whether the FBI investigation is going to interfere with the ongoing MUFON investigation. But I just think it's interesting that the FBI has now involved itself in this investigation. I find that very interesting. Now, I believe cattle mutilations are the result of extraterrestrials. I think that's what's going on here. I mean, I've been talking about this a lot recently on the podcast, that I believe that this is, if scientists of any kind of civilian scientific organization wants to study UFOs, I think the place to start would be at some of these ranches where these cattle mutilations are ongoing. I don't think you're going to find satanic cults showing up and performing the surgical-like incisions on these cattle and draining them of their blood. I mean, as we know, these cattle mutilations, eyeballs are removed, anuses are cored out, the jaws are, the flesh around the mouths are removed, organs are removed, and it's all done apparently with precision lasers. This has been studied for a long time now by people like Linda Moulton Howe, and it looks like there's a heat source that is removing these, a high heat source, at least 300 degrees, removing that is used to remove these parts of the cows that are mutilated. And also, on top of that, the blood is drained completely from these beasts, and there's no sign of blood around the area when they find them. It's very, very strange. So it looks like it's not, it couldn't be predators, right? Predators would be unable to do something like that. And in a lot of these cases, it doesn't look like there's been chewing going on. There's surgical cuts, so that would rule out predators. I mean, common sense would tell you it's not predators doing it, right? And then also a satanic cult. I mean, if it was a satanic cult walking around, creeping around ranches throughout the Midwest, because a lot of these cattle mutilations happen out in that way, New Mexico, Colorado, Texas, Oklahoma, in those areas, right? If they're happening out there in the West, a lot of them happen all over the world, actually. I mean, I was just talking recently about there was a ranching couple in Australia that had lost 20 cattle since 2018. So it's all over the world, but certain places seem to be more hotter than other areas. And so somebody would have been caught by now. Like, that's one of the things, I always point out, that if it was some sort of crazy cult running around these ranches, sneaking around at night, they would have been busted by this point. Nobody's been busted. But a lot of these cases, of course, have UFOs are hovering over these areas during the times when these cattle mutilations occur. So obviously, that's what it is. I mean, common sense tells you that it's extraterrestrial. That's the culprit behind it. But of course, now the FBI is involved, and the FBI has looked into this before, and there's really been they have no answers, really. They never solved it. And now they're looking into it again, and they're telling the ranchers to keep their mouths shut. I think the reason they keep telling them to keep their mouths shut is because they just want to cover it up. I mean, they're not going to get any answers. They're not going to. You think, okay, let's say the FBI is investigating this, and they come up with some evidence that it's actually extraterrestrials. You think the FBI is going to hold a press conference and tell everybody, hey, guess what? We finally found out who's responsible for all these cattle mutilations for over the past 56 years. Since we've been investigating this, it's aliens. You think that's going to happen? No way. It's not going to happen. There's absolutely no chance. In fact, I would imagine that they probably told those ranchers, "Hey, look at we need to keep quiet about these cattle mutilations. We're investigating it now. We got some hot tips. There could be some satanic cults in the area on the loose. So don't say nothing anymore. You might give our tips away. We don't want those satanic cults to know what's going on, that we're looking into this. So just keep quiet. Don't say nothing." I mean, they think we're all fools. The government thinks we're a bunch of idiots. I mean, of course, again, cattle mutilation. That's where we need to be focused on. I really believe that, because if we want to get the answers of of this extraterrestrial phenomenon, if we want to get the absolute proof, that's where it is. I mean, if the FBI really wants to get to the bottom of this, they should stake out one of these ranches, right? Hang out there with some tranquilizer guns, tranquilizer darts, and when they see one of these things landing, if one of these beings happens to get out of the craft to try to push the cow onto the spaceship, then maybe they could shoot it with a tranquilizer dart, right? The not the cow, the alien. And then the next day they could, hey, look what we got. But they're not going to do that. Of course, they're never going to tell us the truth. The government, I really don't believe, are going to tell us the truth. Of course, just recently now, we've been hearing a lot from people in the UFO community. Now, Ross Coulthart, a great UFO investigator, TV reporter from Australia, he was just on a recent podcast during an interview, and he stated that there's things coming down the pike within the next few months. Everyone's gonna know the truth about extraterrestrials. I really hope so. But I just don't trust the government when it comes to UFOs. You just cannot trust the government. I mean, I'm all happy about these whistleblowers, but the way things have been going, that Sean Kirkpatrick hearing where Sean Kirkpatrick was meeting with members of the Senate committee recently, when you think about what he said, that there's no evidence whatsoever of extraterrestrials, there's nothing, even though they've been talking to whistleblowers. When you hear that means that they want to keep this covered up. There's no way they want to tell anybody about it. But there are some people, and I tell you this, there are some people out there that are starting to just say things. And there was an article I found in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, and this was just from April 29th, and this is from Mike Masterson, and this guy has been a longtime Arkansas journalist, was an editor of 3 Arkansas dailies, and headed the Master's Journalism program at Ohio State University. Now, this guy put an opinion piece in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, and I'll tell you what, I'm thrilled about this opinion piece. This is coming from a reporter at a newspaper talking about cattle mutilations, and the title of this article that he put out there was "Cattle Mutilations Are Back." Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing. He gets into what's going on at in Texas right now, but we'll try to read most of it here. He says here, each cow in Texas recently was found in a different location, and there were no signs of a struggle. The grass around each was undisturbed, and there were no footprints or tire tracks discovered near the cattle. One, a 6-year-old cow, was found with a straight, clean cut with apparent precision, removing the hide around one side of the animal's mouth, authorities said. The tongue was also removed and no blood was spilled. The sheriff's office and ranchers reported that no predators or birds had scavenged the remains. While the cows were found in similar conditions, 2 had additional external organs removed. There were no leads in the cases. Theories continue to abound over what causes this bizarre phenomenon that seemed to peak in the United States during the 1970s, yet has been reported worldwide for centuries. Now I'm going to skip through this here a little bit here. Where he says here, speculation about the cause is largely divided between those who believe the phenomena is truly unexplained, or natural predators, or normal cattle deaths made to seem mysterious or paranormal. For those in the unexplained camp, opinions have diverged about the possible explanation. Some law enforcement communities opined that the animals were being mutilated by people in strange quasi-religious rituals. In 1980, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police blamed the mutilations on an unidentified cult. The Department of Criminal Investigations in Iowa, meanwhile, asserted that the mutilations were being conducted by Satanists. And this was reported by the History Channel. Based on the distinctive nature of the injuries to the mutilated livestock and other factors such as no blood being noted at the site and the surgical expertise with which organs were removed with no signs of animal scavenging, I remain of the belief the precision reflects intelligence and intent far beyond that of a predator. Amen. Amen. This is, okay, it's only a local paper, but we have a reporter putting this out in his local newspaper in Arkansas, putting this out that this precision, he has the belief that this precision cuts reflects intelligence and intent far beyond that of a predator. Somebody in the press, I mean, of course, it's on a small scale. It's not the mainstream media, right? But somebody on a small scale just telling you how it is, telling you the truth, coming clean, just using common sense. This is fantastic. Kudos to this guy. Anyway, continuing here, it says, besides, why wouldn't there be ample evidence of carcasses being consumed, which, after all, is normal behavior for predators? Plus, there have been so many cases investigated across the country over the decades, including here in Arkansas, that it defies reason to believe human perpetrators wouldn't have by now been caught. Again, common sense. This is, again, we're seeing common sense. This is a guy writing for a local newspaper, right? That's putting out common sense opinion piece on cattle mutilations. You know, he's not mincing words here. This is fantastic. You don't usually see this. This is great stuff. Anyway, continuing. There can't be that many bored people scattered across the nation risking prison for evenings of mutilating another person's expensive cow, surgically removing its internal organs, eyeballs, tongues, sex organs, and draining every drop of blood to haul away. Why? The History Channel wrote that this is a History Channel article. I should have made that clear before. The History Channel wrote that between April and October 1975, nearly 200 cases of cattle mutilation were reported just in the state of Colorado. Far from being mere tabloid fodder, it has become a nationally recognized issue. That year, the Colorado Associated Press voted it the state's #1 story. Colorado's then Senator Floyd Haskell asked the Federal Bureau of Investigation to get involved. The story continued. Actually, I've actually read this story on my own podcast. I've talked about this article from History Channel. Anyway, continuing here, he says, throughout the 1970s, cases had continued to mount throughout the American heartland, and in 1979, after thousands of reported cattle mutilations causing millions of dollars of livestock losses, the FBI finally opened an investigation into a series of cases that had reportedly taken place on New Mexico's Indian lands. Later on, I'm going to skip forward here, the FBI determined, despite the unique similarities and unlikely circumstances, that all the mutilation deaths appeared to have been from natural causes. So I just want to stop there for a second. If that's the case, if the FBI determined way back in the late 70s that all these things are natural causes, right? Then why are you investigating it again? This is the same. These carcasses that they're finding now in Texas are in the same condition as those carcasses that you were looking at back in the 1970s. Again, it's to cover it up. It's to push this story back into the muck so everyone forgets about it. Hey, rancher, don't look in this. We're on to some hot leads. I think we got them Satanists cornered finally. I mean, they look at us like a bunch of dummies. I mean, don't you see this? They're looking at us like we're a bunch of dummies. It's just so sickening. I'm so tired of it. I really hope Ross Coulthart's right. I mean, come on already. Anyway, let's continue with this. He says, I wonder how that would explain the story from one rancher I read about several years back whose mutilated cow was discovered high in the branches of a pasture tree. Okay, let's just stop there for a minute. Yeah. How is that possible? How some rancher finds his cat, a mutilated cow. His cow's disappeared. He looks up and it's stuck in a tree. How did it get there? And, you know, a lot of times, like Linda Moulton Howe has pointed out over the years, she points out that sometimes their bones are broken like it was dropped from a height. It's unbelievable. But it's real. And again, there's one explanation. It's right in front of our faces. It's extraterrestrial. And just before I continue here, even though I know this, right? It's common sense at this point. I mean, if if it was Satanists or predators or something prosaic, right? Something that's not otherworldly, we would have figured it out by now. But we haven't figured it out because it's otherworldly. It's extraterrestrial. And again, there's UFOs sighted in a lot of these cases. Here's another, continuing, and I love this part here. He says, one theory is the military is experimenting on cattle as guinea pigs. I say hogwash. The Pentagon has plenty of money to acquire its own cattle. I know I just stated this in a recent podcast. I don't know which one it was, but I've talked about this before. Some people believe, in fact, some UFO investigators believe, like Preston Dennett, he believes that the government's responsible for these cattle mutilations as a way to scare people about extraterrestrials. I don't believe that. I don't, I think Preston Dennett's a great investigator, but on this point, I believe he's wrong. I think that, why would the government do that? They don't want us to know about extraterrestrials. They've been keeping it a secret for over 75 years now. So I don't believe that. And furthermore, if they wanted cattle, they could just buy their own. Why would they go sneaking into a rancher's property in the Midwest and steal it and mutilate it and then return it? That doesn't make any sense. Anyway, continuing here, he says, some ranchers have reported seeing and shooting at what appear to be mysterious black helicopters flying over their pastures at night. Others say they have seen unexplained airborne lights at night in fields where their cows were found mutilated the next day. Fact is, the 6 mutilated Texas cattle discovered in Brazos, Madison, and Robertson counties are the latest in a long list of bovines that died in a way humans have tried in vain to understand. Well, I just want to point out again, this article was published on April 29th, as Linda Moulton Howe's recent reporting states that it's up to 8 cattle now. So it's up to 8 cattle in Texas in these. I guess it's not just Madison County; it's Brazos County and Robertson counties. So it's 3 different counties it's happening in. Anyway, continuing. And that brings me to intrepid science investigative reporter and author Linda Moulton Howe of Albuquerque, who, over a distinguished career, has taken hard looks at more than 1,000 animal mutilation cases. Her 1980 Emmy Award-winning documentary, A Strange Harvest, and follow-up 1989 book, An Alien Harvest, further evidence linking animal mutilations and human abductions to alien life forms, conclude extraterrestrials are likely involved. I cast my vote with her informed conclusion. I'm willing to rely on this Stanford master's degree holder's conclusion, considering I haven't closely examined one such case despite a lifelong interest in the mystery. That's actually one of my life's regrets. It makes it even more logical to accept Howe's findings, having encountered a UFO one evening as a boy at Fort Chaffee, and knowing not only was it hovering directly overhead, pulsing and quietly staring down at me and my younger brother, but something far wiser that I had to be piloting it. Now, so he had his own. This writer here had his own experience when he was a kid. That's very interesting. Now go out into the world and treat everyone you meet exactly like you want them to treat you. That's how he ends it. So I see he's agreeing with Linda Moulton Howe. Again, it's using common sense. That's what this is. This is extraterrestrial. Of course, we don't have the absolute end-all proof, right? But, I mean, common sense tells you that this is what it is. Again, it would be nice if there was a scientific group that civilian scientific organizations that could stake out one of these places and try to get the absolute proof. I mean, hey, these alien beings, right? They're responsible for alien abductions. They sneak into people's houses. They or even in broad daylight when people are out and about. They could be out on a camping trip or driving in their car someplace. And next thing you know, they're getting abducted. They lose time and they're brought on board somewhere and they have weird things done to them. And then they're put back to where they were and they forget about it. And they don't recall these events until later on while they're laying in a psychiatrist's couch. So why don't we do something to one of these aliens? I mean, well, if they're doing stuff to us, then why can't we do something to them? If you had the scientific group, I know this sounds crazy, right? But if we want to get to the bottom of this, we want to finally end the debate, then if you had a scientific group of civilian scientists, rather, that would converge on one of these areas where these cattle mutilations are occurring, right? Rather than the FBI, because the FBI is not going to share anything with you. Then maybe there might be that off chance that you, from a distance, maybe set up some sort of a perimeter where you have cameras all over the place and you have sharpshooters with tranquilizer darts, right? Maybe you could pick off a couple of these alien beings before they take off in their craft with the cow and mutilate it. Stop them in their tracks. Why not? It's worth a try. Could be dangerous, right? But hey, it's dangerous every time you walk out the front door. You don't know what's going to happen. Hey, this could be the way that civilians could come up with their own proof rather than waiting for this government that's just sitting on this evidence for all these decades because they're, power hungry and greedy. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk about possible reasons why a possible reason, which I really don't. I might have discussed in a podcast a while ago, maybe over a year ago. I can't remember, but I want to talk about a possible reason why aliens are doing this. Anyway, we will be right back. Okay, we are back. I guess it was probably 2007, somewhere around there. There was a movie that came out called No Country for Old Men. And this bad guy in the movie, played by Javier Bardem, this bad guy, he played this character named Anton Chigurh. Now, this movie, a lot of you might have seen it. It won Best Picture, of course. And this murderer, this horrible sociopath that Javier Bardem was playing, named Anton Chigurh. I don't know how many people, he murdered quite a few people in this movie. And one of the weapons that he uses to kill people is it's a stun gun that's supposed to be used on cows. It's hooked up. He was walking around with this air tank, and he had this hose hooked up to this air tank, and the end of the hose was this stun device, which is basically, instead of a bullet, what comes out is this metal tube, right? And it goes into the head of the cow, and then just basically kills their brain, knocks them out, whatever, and then then we slaughtered them. That's how we kill cows, the human race. But he was using that to kill people. In fact, there was a scene where he actually sticks one of these things up to a guy's forehead and kills him with it. Now, I'm sure people who saw that movie will know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a very horrible, horrible scene, actually. When you see this scene where he does that to the guy, it's not pleasant. But, I eat meat. I eat hamburgers, I'm a big fan of hamburgers. But we know, one thing I've never seen. I've never even tried to seek it out because I don't want to. I know it has to be bad. Slaughterhouses. I mean, what do we do to cattle? I mean, think about what the human race does to cattle. I mean, it's horrible, really, when you think about it. I can't even imagine being a person that works in one of these slaughterhouses, killing animals, any animal, actually. I think it's just horrible. But how do we do it? I mean, in these meat packing, in these slaughterhouses, what happens to cows? They have them all lined up, one after another, and there's somebody standing there, and they put this thing on their head, basically. In a lot of cases, the device that Anton Chigurh was using in No Country for Old Men, they put it on the top of the head. It's almost like a retracting bullet. This rod comes out, goes into the cow's brain and stuns them, and then the animals pushed forward, and where it's continued to be slaughtered. Now, here's an article from called the Human League Org. Now, these people are, I guess they don't like the idea of slaughtering animals for food, and I guess there's a lot of people like that. Of course, like I said, I'm somebody that eats hamburgers, but when I read something like this, it makes me upset a little bit. Like, what am I doing, right? But we all know what we're doing. We all know what's going on, but we do it anyway because this is just the way we are. But anyway, how are the animals? How are cattle killed, for instance? I'm going to just go touch on some of those things. Stunning. That's what they call it. Billions of animals each year suffer a stunning blow to the head, electrocution, or gassing. These humane acts are meant to make slaughter less brutal by swiftly and surely rendering the animals unconscious for their imminent killing. The hope is that these animals won't feel any of the pain to come. The trouble is that stunning doesn't always work. Too many times the animals are awake, alert, and panicked as they go to their deaths. And now I'm going to push forward here with the firearms way. This is how they usually kill cows. It says many slaughterhouses use firearms to stun animals like cows. Rather than using bullets, which would stay lodged in the animal's skulls, these facilities use something called a captive bolt. When the trigger is pulled, a thick piece of metal drives into the brain and, just as quickly, retracts back into the barrel of the gun. Even without a bullet, the result is the same. Cow after cow is knocked unconscious by a decisive shot to the head. Unfortunately, not all cattle fall senseless. As many as 12.5% of cattle in the European Union are not properly stunned and continue to kick as they go on to be hung upside down and slaughtered, all while conscious. And then what do we do? What happens after that, after they get stunned? Well, calves, cows, and bulls, whether raised for veal, dairy, or beef, are stunned and then hoisted midair. Suspended upside down by their legs, their major arteries and veins are severed by a knife. While a seasoned operator might deal the fatal stroke on a first attempt, less experienced workers might make several haphazard gashes. Once the throat is cut, blood gushes forth and steam rises from the wound. A bull's horns are shorn away. His head is skinned and promptly removed, leaving the rest of his body to be scraped, flayed, and eviscerated. Slaughterhouse workers and inspectors have recalled witnessing animals that, against all odds, stayed awake through this torture. Okay, so yeah, it's pretty disgusting how we do this, and unfortunately, around 12% of these animals, even after they're stunned, they're still alive. Some of them, they're still conscious, and they're getting the skin pulled off them, and their throats cut while they're upside down. It's absolutely horrific. But this is the way the world is. I mean, a lot of us eat beef. And just that's how it is, unfortunately. That's the part we don't think about. I mean, I know more about cattle, these mysterious cattle mutilations where there's no answers. I know more about that than I know about this. And it's really sad, but at the same time, I think a lot of us out there are the same way I am. I don't really want to know too much about it. I don't want to see any imagery of it. I don't want to see it. Again, I don't know how. I guess if you're one of these people that work at a slaughterhouse, it must be tough. And especially at first, and maybe after a while, you become immune to it, and you just get used to it. But I'm sure in some cases, you probably never get used to it. It's a tough job. But, we humans, we eat meat. And this is what we do. We slaughter animals to get it. And it's not pleasant. I mean, it's not just, and there's other, cows, hogs, for instance, they're not slaughtered this way. They're actually gassed in a lot of occasions, carbon monoxide, things like that. It's, sad. And then, of course, I believe chickens are electrocuted in a lot of facilities. But again, what if, like I always a lot of people think that the reason for cattle mutilations, the reason aliens are doing this is for food purposes. And it makes sense. I mean, just like us, these things have to eat too, right? You would think. And a lot of people think that these are like insects. That's why they drain the blood from the cattle, and they're using it. And there's been some evidence to this too. I mean, there's been suggestions by the aliens themselves, made by the aliens themselves during when they're speaking to abductees, that they tell them this is that, yeah, we use it as food. There's been at least I know there's at least one or two cases of that. So it could be that that's what it is, that they actually use this as a food source. And there's been some abductees that say they see these aliens, the way they actually, they don't eat food with their mouths, they absorb it through their skin. They'll sit in these tanks filled with fluid. Maybe that fluid is filled with some of this blood from cattle or other animals. It's not just, I don't think it's just cattle. There's been horses that have been mutilated, and I'm sure that there's elk that have been found mutilated, deer, all kinds of animals, and maybe they're feeding on all of that. And the only reason we notice the cattle, of course, because when a rancher starts losing its cattle and finding its cattle mutilated, that's why we know about it. I mean, we probably don't know about how many things really out there are getting mutilated. But that's one of the theories, that they're here. They're basically some people actually believe they're colonizing the planet, and this is what they're doing here with the cattle, is that they're drinking their blood. Okay, that makes sense. So, I mean, and when you think about how we do it, I mean, if the way we treat cattle, why should we really be so upset about it? I mean, we're doing something very similar. I mean, when you really think about it. But maybe that's not the reason, though. Maybe they're not using it for food. This is just, and I know I mentioned this before in a podcast, but I believe it's over a year ago now, and I know I've touched on this before. What if the reason for this, They've been doing it for decade after decade after decade. What if they're looking at us and they're seeing how we survive, how we live, and they see how we slaughter other animals, how we slaughter animals to eat them, like cows, and they don't like it's just something that they don't want us to be doing. They don't like it. It's not right for whatever reason in the minds of these extraterrestrials. And what they're doing is they're taking these cattle and mutilating them, and they're just leaving them there and showing us. They're sending a message. They're trying to send us a message that, hey, this is terrible what you're doing. This is what you're doing. You see what we just did? That's what you're doing on an incredible, even a bigger, gigantic, much larger scale than what we're doing here. We're mutilating some cattle here and there, across all these ranches. It's in the thousands probably every year. All right, it's not nearly as much as humans, right? Of course. That we know of. I mean, we don't know how many other animals they're mutilating. But again, what if that's what the reason is? What if they're trying to send a message? This is the way of communicating with us. That hey, look at what you're doing. Wake up already. What are you doing killing these animals? Why are you eating animals? Why can't you be eating vegetables? Why can't all of you be vegetarians? Why are you killing animals and eating them? You know how primitive that seems. Maybe that's what they're trying to send to that message, that we're still too primitive, and the way we need to come out of this is to stop being primitive. We need to stop killing animals and living off animals. That there has to be other ways we could live rather than eating meat all the time. Maybe eating meat maybe that's why the human race is so violent in the first place. Maybe the reason people are running around killing each other all the time is because we're meat eaters. Maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. Maybe if we, that's what it is. There's a message being sent here. Hey, you got to get off this murder kick. You're killing all these animals left and right. These animals, they have brains in their heads. They're thinking creatures. They're friendly creatures. They're not hurting anyone. What are you doing? Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. It's just a theory. I mean, doesn't mean I'm going to stop eating meat. I'm sure within the next couple of days I'll be eating a big juicy hamburger with cheese on it and ketchup and onions. I'm sure of it. But at the same time, maybe it's something we need to think about. This could be what's going on. This could be the message. Maybe they're not really feeding on it. They're just doing this for this purpose. I could be totally wrong, but again, hey, we don't really know. We have no idea. It sounds crazy, but hey, we just don't know. We don't know what they're doing. I believe that extraterrestrials are responsible for these cattle mutilations, but we don't know what the reason is. It could be just that they're feeding on them too. But then again, maybe they're trying to send us a message that, hey, look at you carnivorous Neanderthals. You need to grow up already. Like, what are you doing killing all these helpless, friendly animals that, how could you look at yourself in the mirror and keep doing this? Maybe they're telling us we need to stop it. Maybe there's a message in there somewhere. I don't know. Who knows? Anyway, until next time.